Welcome to Peas in a Podcast. If you've ever thought, why didn't somebody tell me this before I started running my own business, you are in the right place.
Each week, we unpack the human stuff that makes or breaks your business without the corporate wank. This week, we are talking about...
probationary period management.
How exciting. Are you going to introduce our special guest?
Yes, I am. This is Simba. Say hi, Simba. This is the office dog.
Office dog. It's
Yes.
lovely to have him here. It feels like a therapy dog.
He is a bit like a therapy dog, isn't he? Bless him.
He's so lovely. Let's see how long he can sit quietly for. It wouldn't surprise me if it's the entire duration.
No. On the basis he barely moves for like 9 hours that he's here.
I don't think I noticed he was here for the first half a day. So,
okay, let's get into it.
Probationary periods. Why such a hot topic?
Okay, so this, as a result of everything that's been going on in terms of the changing legal landscape over the last, since Labour came into power, really, probably one of the most significant changes that has been proposed as a result of the Employment Rights Act coming into force is the reduction of the qualifying period for unfair dismissal rights. It was certainly the one that hit the headlines the most. And it's probably one of the biggest shake-ups that we've seen, certainly in the last 15 years that I've been practicing HR. So, and that has a knock-on effect. That type of change has a knock-on effect to the way employees are recruited and the need to get that right first time. It also has a knock-on effect to the way employees, once they are offered a role, are inducted into an organisation and how that initial period of employment is managed by the managers of those employees to make sure that they are pragmatically and consciously ensuring that the employee is the right fit for the role. And that's why probationary period management has become that much more important. Because from January next year, employers are not going to have 2 years to assess whether an employee is right for the job anymore. They're going to have 6 months. And that generally aligns to what we would call a robust probationary management period.
Yeah. Okay. And that's really the crux of it, isn't it? Because for somebody who's operational by nature, they might not understand what that actually means, that unfair dismissal. But this is about the fact they'll probably all know the language. I got 2 years before it's a problem.
Yeah.
So basically, that's not the case anymore, whether that should have been at all. Yeah. But now it's 6 months. We need to make sure that this person is exactly right for the role. So that can be quite scary. No wonder it's hit the headlines. And so what I know what I'm seeing, but what are you seeing in terms of the response on the ground in small businesses to this? Is it panic? Is it we need to get our ducks in a line? Is it oblivion?
It's more oblivion. It's quite concerning. And I think why that's so concerning for me is quite a lot of, I guess it's human nature to worry about something when it happens, right? And the law doesn't change until January next year. However, the ramifications of the law changing next year is affecting us now.
Right.
So what a lot of employers don't realise is that if they start an employee in role tomorrow, they will have full employment rights in terms of unfair dismissal claims from January.
Wow. So
this isn't something that applies to employees that are recruited from January onwards. This hits home now.
Yeah.
Well, it should be hitting home now, sorry. And it's quite concerning for me how many employers are oblivious. Considering how many employers I see rely on that extended period of time to make decisions around whether they're going to retain an employee post that 2-year mark or not. Yeah, that's what I'm seeing, which is slightly worrying.
And that's not a surprise to me, because oftentimes they are relying on it, but they might not be knowingly rely on it. Some do, some are savvy, and some, you hear, I think we've most recently heard a recruitment consultant say, well, less than 2 years service, so just get shot. And it's like, whoa, hold on, it's not quite that simple for a load of reasons we're not going to discuss now.
Let's not name names either.
No,
He'll kill us.
He knows who he is, and we love him dearly. But actually, they'll either knowingly do it because they've heard that one line and felt completely safe to remove someone from their business based on it, which is still slightly worrying, or they don't know it at all until they speak to somebody, and actually it has to form part of the decision, somebody like you, it has to form part of the decision-making criteria about how you might deal with the situation they've got. And what's really interesting about this is we run recruitment training. and have done for a lot of time. And we often use the words, your recruitment assessment process isn't done until you finished your probationary period. But this feels like that message has to go right to the core now. Like that's the important overriding message, right?
Yeah, this isn't a formality anymore. This isn't just good practice. This is essential.
Yeah.
To reduce the level of legal risk that you may well find yourself in as an employer. But we've always advocated for this sort of conscientious, proactive, pragmatic performance management of an employee from day one, haven't we?
Yeah.
Right? It's not just about legal risk. It's about reputational risk. It's about how you're seen as an employer. Sorry, Simba's licking my fingers. That's really put me off. It's about how you're seen to your employees, how much you care about this stuff, not just because the law changes.
Yeah.
So although the law changing should be a kick up the bum to some employers, I think it's something that we've always advocated that employers should get right. And I think that's what we need to move into, right? I want to talk more. I want to use this session more to talk about what are the basics of good probationary period management.
Yeah. And I think, interestingly enough, we did a podcast previously on recruitment, and I think there's a shortcut opportunity here. So for the first time ever, I feel like saying, if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it. Because I feel like in the recruitment process, we talked a lot about role scoping and the importance of that exercise of actually coming out with a job description that reflects not only the technical competencies but the behavioural competencies in the form of a person specification. It's somewhere you can put your values. It's somewhere where you do that piece of alignment between the greater purpose of the organisation, who they are, what they stand for, the mission, the reason they exist in the first place. All of that, when done properly, is what we call the role scoping, isn't it? And we could talk all about that all day long, but we've done that. We did that in a previous episode, so go and have a listen to that. But the reason that becomes so important at the point of probationary management is because what it gives you is the starting point for some probationary objectives, doesn't it? And one of the things I see quite often with small business owners, particularly, depending on where they've come from, where their background is, you know, where they've worked previously, is that I will ask them about a probationary period and they will hand me an induction checklist. So I wonder if we were to work on the basis that we know all that lovely good practice about the recruitment, whether, unless there's anything you'd like to add, whether we then just sort of default to how do you set up for a well-managed, robust, all the good things you said, probationary period. And for me, it would be to take that document that you've had all of that lovely time spent on it to make sure it does everything you need it to do, not just for your recruitment process to work really well, but to be able to manage performance. Is Simba off?
He's off.
He's going. So to take that document and to break it down into what does good look like in 6 months. If I was to imagine myself not coming to a decision about this person until the end of a probationary period, and we can talk about what that period is in terms of timeframes. What would I be saying good looked like? Would they be doing all of this job really well, everything that's on this list? How would I know? How am I therefore going to assess that? And that starts to give you some probationary objectives.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's probably really important. Sometimes employers get hung up with terminology, right?
Yes.
Objectives, goals, aims. It doesn't really matter. It's like you said, what does good look like, and being able to convey that to the employee in some sort of tangible way.
Absolutely.
So that's what we mean when we talk about objectives, right? And it's going to be different in every organisation. A senior, what end of probationary periods objectives look like for a member of a delivery team versus an assistant, a head of operations, for example, are obviously going to look very different.
Absolutely.
And those objectives and those goals have to be proportionate to the role and relevant.
Yes.
And what you've just mentioned about timeframes for assessing fit as well, in terms of probationary period lengths, is really key as well, and becomes that much more important when the legal changes come in. So where the threshold for unfair dismissal rights will be coming in at 6 months, we need to be making sure that we're aligning probationary period lengths to that time frame. And when I say that, that's when it becomes slightly complicated in terms of the way employment law works. But essentially, you need to allow yourself as an employer or as a manager enough time to be able to really assess whether an employee is hitting those objectives, whilst considering whether you've allowed long enough for the employee to hit those objectives based on what they are and how long they're going to take. And we also have the additional consideration now around notice periods. So if for some reason you are considering not sustaining an employee in role, you need to take into account what your notice period is contractually, what you've tied yourself into, and factor that in when deciding when you should book in an end of probationary review. So, and I'll talk about that a little bit later because it does get a little bit complicated. So you're considering a number of things. How long is it reasonably going to take for an employee to achieve a particular objective? And how long have I got that I can assess that up all based on what the law's going to say moving forwards? And also taking into account whatever notice period the employee would be entitled to, whether that's legally or contractually. Yeah. So they're all considerations that a manager has to factor in when setting these objectives and the time frame that they're setting for assessing when they're achieved.
Yeah, and it takes us back to that idea that it doesn't really matter what you call it, a goal, objective, a deliverable, or whatever. You can, we have had people call them rocks, with the big rocks, the small rocks, and the sand. It doesn't matter. Call it whatever you want. Call it a pink unicorn. It's what good looks like. Yeah. And actually, if you've got a role that is particularly complicated, or there's some core training that's needed, or it's something in a different industry and somebody's coming from you without that experience, the training window could potentially exceed the probationary window. And that isn't a good enough excuse not to allow yourself to set some goals that are proportionate to what good looks like within that 3-month, 5-month, whatever it is, time frame. So it's about doing those checks and measures, isn't it? And saying, okay, well, I might not have long enough for them to achieve everything I want them. I wouldn't expect them to be, in inverted commas, up and running, but I would expect them to be showing promise. I would expect them to be engaging with the learning. I would expect them basics of the role. And that's back to that piece of looking at the job description and saying, well, if this is 100%, I need them at 80 within the first 5-6 months. So what does 80% look like to me in actual practice, regardless of what you call it? And then just start jotting that down, because it gives you a bit of a North Star. And it also helps you to start to pick up those early warning indicators that maybe something's off and it's not working out. And I think it's also then about looking at how reasonable it is to assume that that person will get there on their own, and think about what support is needed, which then enables you to be able to actually plan for somebody starting and make sure that you have enough time to give them the best possible chance of going through that period and settling in really well, and or peers, colleagues, training, whatever it might be, thinking about it a little bit more intentionally up front. Again, a little bit like the scoping of the job description, it's work that pays off later on, isn't it? Because you've actually got something concrete.
It absolutely is. And then you've got the additional dynamics around culture fit. So we've spent the last 5 minutes talking about actual tangible objectives, so SMART goals, deliverables, whatever you want to call them. But an organisation that has really well defined its own identity, that understands its own DNA, that has a really clear sense of vision and purpose, will have really clear underpinning values that will be able to translate to underpinning behaviours. So we're not just talking about what does the employee need to do, what do they need to achieve within a certain time frame within their probationary period. It's how the employer needs them to achieve that. And that adds another layer on top of what probationary period management has to become about. Because I see as many employees not sustaining roles because of a lack of behavioural fit, as I do because they're not actually capable technically of doing the job. So you have to come at it from a bit of a two-pronged attack.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that when I'm talking about red flags, often from what I'm seeing, the red flags tend to come not in the form of what they're not achieving early doors. Often managers are a little bit more patient, in the early stages, and they should be. So it's not quite so often they're not doing the thing I need them to do. You do get a bit of that. I feel I've been missold, okay. Often there's a little bit more patience and allowance for people to get settled in. But when somebody's not saying good morning to people in the morning, or unlikely to do their bit making the tea, that's when there tends to be those amber and red flags going up. And we know that this is one of those areas that managers struggle with generally anyway, because it feels subjective and it feels personal. So, it feels like and I think we have on every podcast talked about DNA and values, but that is because we are so strong on them. But again, it just helps you to plan, not just even wait for that to happen, plan your recruitment process in such a way that those values and those behaviours factor into the questions, but also plan your probationary activities around making sure someone really understands that. And I walked into another client office the other day, actually, for a meeting, and was ushered into the kitchen. And the founder director was standing in front of 5 or 6 new recruits, who I was then introduced to, and it was lovely, doing a values huddle and saying, this is how we kind of came to be. This is what's really important to us. And I just thought, that's brilliant. I got very excited and started saying, you've got your origin story in there. You've got to get that out. Make sure everyone hears how you started. People like to insert themselves into a timeline. This is like really good stuff. But I was just so impressed to see that, because it's not just about what you do in terms of the reactive. It's about how you then plan to help them understand what's expected, which sets them up for success, not just for the technical stuff. It's not just about, like you say, putting the training in and the peer mentoring and whatever it might be and teaching them how to use the phone. That's what we tend to see in the induction. And I alluded to this. When I'm given an induction checklist, it will have the traditional stuff on there that is important, like where the fire muster point is and who you need to report to if an alarm goes off, and the fact that we have a drill every Tuesday. And there might be stuff in there around how you get your IT logons from, and someone's going to do your IT induction.
And where the big dusty HR handbook is with 100 million policies in it you need to read in the next 2 weeks.
Oh, did anyone say brief HR? If you're looking for HRIS, you know where to find us. Yeah, absolutely. The big manual, the onboarding manual. The fact that you'll need to sit with somebody and sign policies relating to GDPR, or when you won't use social media, and all of that kind of really transactional stuff is normally about 2 weeks worth of activities.
Really boring activities.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of them are health and safety. I always remember one of our clients going, oh God, is it time to do the display screen DCSE assessment? It's like, yep, let's tick the box. But that's the point. They can be put into a 2-week table, meet the chief executive, meet the managing director, meet your manager, whatever it is. They can be ticked off transactionally. They don't help someone feel settled into an organisation. And for me, I find that terminology quite helpful. Yes, you need an induction to satisfy your health and safety and all your practicalities, and that forms part of your probationary period planning or your settling in period. And then deciding, like we've talked about, how long that's going to last for, deciding how much training and support you're going to provide within it, then helps you start building out other things that are actually quite fun. Again, it's, you're going to spend some time shadowing. One of the things I really love doing when I'm helping people design onboarding, settling in, probationary periods is trying to make them as self-directed as possible, especially in founder businesses where it might be the first, second, third employee. So I really like to write a really lovely welcome message, and whether that's given to them as part of a pack or whether that's sent in advance by email, it doesn't really matter, that says, we are so excited to have you on board. This is what your first week is going to look like. Maybe your first 2 weeks. This is going to be your buddy, or I'm going to be available to you at this time every day, whatever you can provide for. After that, we're going to set you some goals. And some of them might be, I want by the end of month 1 for you to have spent 20 minutes with every team member getting to know them, and maybe tell me 3 interesting facts about them. So it's self-directed. You will have the IT induction. You will have their contact details. I'm expecting you to go and have a virtual coffee or a physical coffee with them and find out 3 interesting facts. So there are ways of doing it. It should be resource heavy when you bring someone on. This is an investment that is worth spending time and energy on. And at the same time, we are always big advocates for people take responsibility for their own performance. If you've enabled them with the resources, you can set self-directed probationary goals, and whether they take the initiative to achieve those is quite a good indicator.
I was going to say, that's an indicator of almost a behavioural objective in itself, isn't it? And I think this is where it can get slightly blurry or nuanced in terms of employers that have concerns around employees, where you're right, there are some really clear-cut behavioural, values. So, like you've mentioned, like whether somebody says hi in the morning or not. But there's also those little ones, like whether somebody is always coming in work a couple of minutes late, for example, which are less clear cut in terms of knowing whether that's an actual issue, and the employer tending to give it more time for the employee just to start getting these things right without making clear what those expectations are. So some expectations, whether behavioural or technical, are easy to convey. They're easy to document. But some, even the employer hasn't quite put their finger on. They know they're concerned. They know the employee's not quite doing something they want them to. And I think self-directive, I mean, this is where feedback comes in as well, but self-directed objectives really tell you quite quickly how engaged an employee is and how motivated they are to really work towards and fulfill those goals that are being set.
Yeah, and they can be fun and they can be really simple, like the one I've just given you. But I really like it when they are a reflection of what's important to the company as well. So it may well be find out why there's a wooden clock hanging behind the managing director's desk. Like it's almost like a treasure hunt, right? But again, if someone doesn't engage upon that, and and it's an important thing to your business, it shows you whether they've made the emotional connection. And like you make your point about feedback there, building in when people can expect to catch up with you in their probationary period right at the outset, I think is really important, both from a visibility and I have someone to support me and I'm not going to be just left to it, but also from an accountability perspective as well, that someone's going to ask me if I've done that task. Someone's going to ask me for my feedback on that. And if they haven't done it, it opens up a really interesting conversation about why not. And there might be a really genuine reason. It might be a genuine lack of confidence. And again, those things might be okay, and you might be prepared to coach through it, mentor through it, buddy them up, find a workaround, put some training or whatever the thing is. But actually, without having those really key catch-up points, they don't need to be long and they don't need to be complicated and they don't need to be overly formal, to ask them if they have, at this point, I know you're going to challenge me on that, but at the point where we're just trying to get someone really settled in, it does give you that opportunity, if things haven't happened, you might give them a little bit more time, but to say what's happening for you, to actually understand whether it is an issue that you're prepared to work through. Because somebody's sitting there going, actually, I really struggle to speak to people. You might go, okay, well, that's not a massive part of your role. You're working on your own somewhere, but we would really like you to do it. How can we help make sure that happens and let them have a second chance at it? If they're like, I couldn't care less what my colleagues are doing, then that's a slightly bigger red flag, isn't it?
You're right. And I guess I come at it from the procedural aspect. So this is always going to be a balance of substance and procedure, because they are the two things that when you get right, they protect the integrity of the organisation, especially in relation to any difficult decisions that might need to be made about that employee's future. Substantially, are they hitting their targets? Are they where they need to be? Are they the right fit for the organisation? Procedurally, as an employer, have we hit all of those touch points and those opportunities to review and feedback to the employee to let them know, one, what's expected of them, and to review their progress against achieving them. So the structure is really, really key as well. And part of your probationary period clause in your contract, or your probationary period management policy, if you're going to have one from next January, or if you've got one in place now, that's great, should dictate when those review periods are. So the employee is really, really clear around when those meetings are going to occur, and what's going to be discussed within them. So, and that comes back to timeframes, right? I think we've always advocated for monthly, in some roles, monthly reviews. At least if you don't have the capacity, or you're not able to invest that level of time in a new employee in their probationary period, then a probationary review at least month 3 and then month 5, to give you that opportunity at month 5 to make a decision as to whether you think they're going to succeed or not, based on how they've progressed through the entire period, but most importantly at that month 3 prompt, I think is really, really key.
And there's a couple of things in there that I really want to put a spotlight on that you've said. Oftentimes, without those structured reviews, not only do you get to a point where it's the end of the probationary before someone's actually a manager is starting to critically evaluate whether this person's going to work out or not, they haven't necessarily had any reviews to even flag that the person isn't doing well. And therefore that person hasn't had the chance to put it right. And that creates a really difficult situation. So it's both about having those interfaces regularly enough to be able to flag up that there are problems, but then seeing it as your role as a manager to help do your part towards fixing it. So the one part of that was they're not having the reviews, and they decided that the probationary period is simply making a decision at month 6. Now, not going to work out. It's like, okay, but when did you tell them? When did you sit down with them? But then also recognizing that it is your job to set someone up for success and tell them if it's not working and give them a chance to fix it by setting slightly different goals to be really, really sure that that's the case. And actually you just haven't decided 5 months and 28 days in that, yeah, no.
And again, reputationally, that's a risk, right? You never want to be blindsiding an employee, like you said, 2 weeks before their 6-month service threshold, that they're not working out in role and you've made a decision not to continue them. The emotional reaction that's going to invoke from any employee is going to be entirely understandable if they haven't been given the heads up effectively, and like you said, the opportunity earlier on in the probationary period to have that communicated with them so they understand what's expected of them in terms of that performance improvement. So yes, those reviews are not just procedurally important and possibly contractually, they're also, from an integrity perspective, they're key to ensuring that an employee is going to receive the end decision, if that decision is one to not continue them in role, in a more constructive way.
Yeah, you're almost making it worse for yourself, aren't you, by shocking and surprising them.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things that's really important to convey is we've seen some pretty spectacular turnarounds.
Yes.
At the point that people get the feedback they needed and actually understand. And I'll go back to that example that we shared before, that when we ask a whole bunch of people in a room who, if people here weren't doing a good job, would they want to know? Everyone puts their hand up.
Yeah.
People want to generally do a good job. And like we said before, the toxicity tends to come from not being told straight where they're not hitting the mark and being given the tools and resources and feedback to get better. It's a different story if you provide that and somebody doesn't grasp it. Then you're genuinely within your rights to start questioning whether you've made a mishire here and it's not going to work out, and you probably need to carefully, sensitively, safely, all the other things, move somebody on. But actually to not tell somebody you haven't been doing a good job and here's why, it deprives everybody of the opportunity to turn it around. And we've seen some real drastic turnarounds where people say, I can't believe it. And I think there is something in here around writing people off. And I think that's
assumptions.
Making
assumptions.
That they won't hit it. So there's no point giving that feedback. There's no point setting the stretch objectives. There's no point putting in more training because they just won't get it. And okay, sometimes it's fundamental, but oftentimes with the right approach, you can get somebody there. And we know that recruitment's really expensive. So why would you not want to try? You've already committed at that point. Like this stuff, when you actually put the work in up front, it's not too difficult. It is a time investment. It is a process investment. It is about rigor. But actually, if it saves you having to go back to the drawing board and do the whole thing again, surely that's beneficial.
Absolutely. I think managers can also get tied up with assuming that employees' values and principles should match their own. Yeah. Therefore, they're almost expected to be mind readers around understanding what's important to the manager and the employer. And don't get me wrong, I've been in plenty of situations where I've felt I've facilitated a process and thought the same thing, where it's that obvious. Well, yeah, the fact that you turn up 20 minutes late every morning, the fact that you couldn't see that might be a problem to your manager is actually more concerning than the actual lateness. Yeah. So yes, there are those clear-cut examples, but we also see those scenarios where we turn round to a manager or a business leader and we go, that was important to you, yes. But how's this employee supposed to know that if you haven't told them? Yeah. And it's just a difference in principles, a difference in values, and there's not necessarily a clear-cut right or wrong or conduct issue there. The thought process is different. Yeah. And that's when an employer or a business leader or a manager really has a responsibility to communicate. It's like we say, no employee has ever left for being over-communicated with. They like to understand what's being expected of them. And an employer can come unstuck quite quickly if they take the attitude of, I shouldn't have to tell you.
Yeah, no, completely. Okay, so it feels as though we have covered the main points of this. There's probably more, but first off, it's about defining the technical, the behavioural competencies, making sure they're really clear in your head and any underpinning behaviours that you're expecting to see. Setting a process for your probationary period that is bigger than an induction process. Yes, bake in all of that stuff that you would normally include around health and safety and ticking boxes, but that's part of, not the whole thing when it comes to your probationary planning. To make sure you've included reviews so that you have a process by which to check that the person is on track with their objectives, whether they're technical or behavioural, to be able to provide feedback and, importantly, coach. And I think those are the two biggest manager skills for this particular process, is being able to coach and feedback.
Absolutely.
So that you can help somebody stretch and grow if they're not doing well. To notice early if there are things that are amber flags, notice them when they're amber instead of red.
Warning signs, yeah.
Yeah, and set the timeframes for your probationary up front so that everybody's aware how long it's going to last and when they can expect to be checked in with. And don't write people off. I think there's a really key thing there, not too early. And there was something I really want to come back to that you said that I think was a shock to me. There was two things, actually. One, this is in play right now. So if I hire someone tomorrow, they will be within their rights to, they will come into the, what am I saying?
We're keeping this in. Yes, if you employ somebody now, they will have full rights, not to be unfairly dismissed.
Thank you.
from January onwards. So it's about making sure that you are really intentionally and proactively assessing that employee's performance against those, like you said, behavioural and technical objectives.
Thank you. From now. And the second part, let's see if I got this, is around taking account of your notice period. This was a big one for me. So when I listen to you do these webinars for our clients, I'm thinking, okay, if I was in the ops director seat, month 5, if you've got a 1 month notice period, is when you have to make your final decision.
Yes, absolutely. I think you will have 6 months to assess and make a decision on whether you're going to sustain an employee in role or not.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you can do your end of probation review at their 6-month service date.
No.
You have to take into account any notice period that you would have to provide them with, regardless of whether you do or whether you pay them in lieu of notice. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Take that into account. And if you have a contractual notice period that's longer than the statutory one, the contractual one applies. So make sure you know what's in your employee's contracts in terms of that entitlement, and therefore structure those reviews and, most importantly, that end of period review in line with those timeframes.
So
it's
don't
really
have a 3-month notice period and a 3-month probationary. I am hearing.
Yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. That's quite a lot packed into a short amount of time. There's definitely some more we can cover around feedback and coaching, but in terms of nuts and bolts, I feel like we've covered it, haven't we? Okay, that's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Share this podcast with your network and follow us on our socials at PIAP Consulting.
Join us next time. And until then, remember, people problems don't fix themselves.
And healthy cultures never happen by accident. See you next Tuesday.